here. To state the obvious, 2020 is not just a new year, but a new decade. And while we all cling to the ephemeral idea that our resolutions will last past January, we also get a clean slate of what will define this decade. The 90s gave us the internet and boy bands, the 2000s gave us the first iPhone and reality television, and the last 10 years gave us streaming technology, the global rise of populism, and 5 Fast and Furious movies? Really? 5? So what will this decade bring? Will these 20s be roaring? The 1920s, aka the Roaring Twenties, aka the Jazz Age, aka this bathtub gin may cause blindness, but it's a great buzz era, was a decade remembered for its flappers, gangsters, prohibition, and the Charleston. While the fashion and glorified organized crime may not come back anytime soon, comparing some of the trends that made the 1920s roaring to the trends that we have going into 2020, who's to say that the next decade won't also be roaring? Or at least roaring in flames. Because, you know, global warming. First, the economy during the 1920s was booming. Thanks to post-war economic expansion and Republican presidents who favored business over regulation, the national total wealth more than doubled.
We are in a hot economic boom.
Big name stock, all hitting record levels.
Far and away the hottest economy anywhere in the world.
And a very small few were very cash rich.
The top 0.1% of the population has a net worth that is equal to the bottom 90% combined.
That's the most pre-tax income that bracket of earners has claimed since the 1920s.
All this economic prosperity launched Americans into a consumer society. For the first time, people across the country were buying appliances, radios, ready-to-wear clothing. And for the first time, nationwide advertising was selling the idea that Americans had lifestyles to maintain and needed these new products.
The great American consumer estimated 116 million shoppers hitting the store.
Expected to spend more than $1,000.
Consumer spending is still going strong.
$18,000 a year on non-essentials.
I bought TV, I bought air fryer, so I'm like really happy to get this good deal.
And cars. You can't talk about the Roaring Twenties and not mention Henry Ford and his Model T, which not only made cars affordable at the beginning of the decade, but basically made them a necessity by the end of it.
Self-driving minivans.
I'm on the motorway in real life.
Almost all cars produced will be autonomous. Owning a car that does not have autonomous capability will be a bit like owning a horse.
And the Roaring Twenties brought the dawn of the new woman. These rebellious young women did away with Victorian corset and cut their hair, shortened their skirts, and wore makeup. They drank, they smoked, they partied, and most importantly, they voted. Well, white women voted.
Only 5 women, that is amazing!
The world's first all-female spacewalk.
Then who's taking care of the baby? The TV is taking care of the baby, okay?
The 1920s also brought the Harlem Renaissance, which increased the visibility and influence of Black culture across America.
#1 on the New York Times bestsellers list.
Sink into the floor.
Stand right there and experience your roots.
You better off watching Roots.
Overall, the 1920s was defined by urbanism, modernity, money, and the rejection of traditional values and restrictive norms. But the part of the 1920s that's a lot harder to recreate at a Great Gatsby party is the cultural civil war that had started. Between the modernists who embraced new styles and social trends and valued independence, open-mindedness, and decadence, and the traditionalists who recoiled from all these changes and reacted with a defense of religious values and the rejection of diversity and equality. The divide wasn't just philosophical, it was also geographical. For the first time in the country's history, more people were living in cities than on rural farms, and the city dwellers tended to embrace the cultural changes, while the rural folks did not.
You could put half of Trump's supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
He described the 2016 election as a revolt by the forgotten masses against the elites.
Elites have long failed to understand and appreciate the massive group that makes up the white working class.
Some of it's coal, some of it's jobs, some of it's trade, but we have to think too, they were tired of being abused by the Democrat Party.
Religion had a direct face-off with science with the fight over Darwin's theory of evolution. Fundamentalist Christians passed the Butler Bill, which outlawed teaching anything that denied divine creation. This led to the famed Scopes monkey trial, which included the defense of the literal truth of Jonah and the whale.
We keep hearing that 2014 has been the warmest year on record. I asked the chair, you know what this is? It's a snowball.
You don't know whether or not that would have happened with or without man. You don't know.
I would say that there were climate exaggerators.
The decade kicked off with the Red Scare. This led to an anti-communist and anti-immigration hysteria and campaigns depicting Eastern European immigrants as criminals.
The vile criminal cartel MS-13.
Increasing white immigration and decreasing non-white immigration.
Oh, the brown walkers are coming to rape and pillage America.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
U.S. Attorney General Palmer authorized raids across the country, in which hundreds of immigrants were rounded up, judged without a trial, and deported.
Immigrant communities across the country bracing for an ICE crackdown.
I am going to create a new special deportation task force.
Big city mayors who say local cops won't be helping ICE agents believe the president is playing the worst kind of politics, the kind that could break families apart.
And this all led to the passage of the Immigration Act of 1924, which set strict immigration quotas and drastically limited the number of Italian, Jewish, Greek, Polish, and Asian immigrants.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
No ban, no wall, no ban.
We have people coming into the country or trying to come in. We're stopping a lot of them. These aren't people. These are animals.
But what really defined the culture war of the 1920s was the growing popularity of a certain white-wearing group. No, not that kind of group. That kind. Yep, the 1920s saw the second rise of a much more marketable KKK. Their messaging this time around advocated for the restoration of true Americanism. And they weren't just anti-black this time. They fused racism, anti-Semitism, anti-Catholicism, and anti-immigration with a skepticism about science and ideas about female purity and male dominance in the household. And that messaging worked. Like the Backstreet Boys, millions of people from across the country joined the fan club.
Jews will not replace us!
The number of hate groups has been increasing pretty frighteningly.
1,020 hate groups in the United States last year.
Virginia's governor declared a state of emergency in Charlottesville today.
Hate is self-preservation. Today's hateful messages are now disguised as free speech.
So it's not really surprising that instead of the Roaring Twenties, some historians refer to them as the Tribal 20s. And considering from where we're starting this decade, both titles could very well end up applying to the 2020s. On the one hand, the consumer still dominates our economy, technology continues to change our lives for better or for worse, and women and people of color continue to break down barriers. But America is still caught in a battle for cultural supremacy between nationalists who long for a past America that will probably never happen again, and progressives pushing for change and invoking ideals like equality for all that the US has never quite attained. This leaves us where we began. What will define the 2020s? Could we break this tension and create something new? Or is this ideological civil war just part of the fabric of American culture? My personal hope is for the former. Because as we all should have learned from Marty McFly in the decade defined by big hair, yuppies, and Reaganism, we can visit the past to learn from it, but the danger is getting stuck there. I'm Kristin Brey, and thanks for watching Below the Fold. If you like this video, please like, comment, and share, and come back in 2 weeks for my next episode, or check me out at www.belowthefold.co or on my social medias at Kristin Brey. Thanks for watching.